You're back with Rock and Roll Rugby, and boy, what a game did this end out to be. I think no one would have expected this game to be so close between the Fijians and Georgia. So firstly, let me say that I don't know if you really have to say well done Fiji. Individual tries made them win this game at the end, but you know, from an overall team perspective, it wasn't the best performance. From the Georgians, I have to say, well, let's say well done Fiji, because you know what, they got it done in the end, but it was not exceptional if you look at the full game. On the other side, from a Georgian point of view, I mean, these guys were outstanding. You know, their defense to me was the thing that stood out the most. You know, this Fijian team has been able to kind of break the Australian line. They've been able to break many lines. In the build-up, they broke the England back line. The Fijians could not break this defense line much. Only those 1-2 individual tries. But it was really, really hard for them to break through this Georgian defense. If Georgia had to work a little bit at their handlings, they still knock balls from time to time. And if they can work a bit at their discipline and not conceding so much penalties, this Georgian team, I can tell you now, can compete with the likes of Australia, England and Fiji. I've got so much to unpack, guys. Let's get into the game. Now, from the start, you could see that one thing that Georgia did very well, they starved the Fijians of ball. So from the start, they were playing a lot of phases, playing very patiently. Their defense was outstanding, like I mentioned, and they were holding on to ball, playing up to 10 phases sometimes, and building up that scoreboard pressure. You know, when they got penalties, they were just outstanding. From a Fijian point of view, first off, I felt the two things that the Fijians was good at was just, for me, they were decent with their jackling, getting over the ball. The likes of Abatia, Tuiasofa, with the jackling, they were really good. And the other thing was their scrums was really strong as well, but the Georgians also had a good scrum, but it was just really good competitive scrumming. They went back to the type of play before they played Australia, and I thought, look, they've changed their game a bit, but they haven't fully. This game was very loose. Now, I don't know if they thought that they just run the ball, move it around and play that kind of Fiji style type game, and they'd be able to outrun Georgia and score tries and put a big score on the board. It didn't quite work out like that for them because they were so loose and just throwing the ball around. Many knock-ons, very poor handling, the ball often just thrown into like empty spaces where there's no one, and the ball having odd bounces and guys knocking balls on. It was just too loose. They didn't slow it down, and then what happened is when they got opportunities to run, often they'd isolate. So they'll run away from their players to clean out, and then doing what I've said to you guys before. And guys, I have said this if you've watched my videos in my commentary about Fiji. Fiji cannot play too loose and isolate their players too much, because if those players are isolated, when you play teams like the Georgians are very competitive at the breakdown. They are really a very competitive team at the breakdown. And this is what the Fijians will face moving on in this World Cup. So they need to not isolate as much and get over the ball to clean out. So from a defense point of view, very good with the jackling and the breakdowns, but not very good at cleaning their own ball. Often isolating, and that causes the turnovers and the problems for them, and then just too loose. Quite often just literally playing laterally over the field. So moving the ball from the left to the right, not breaking the line anywhere with this Georgian defense, and then eventually just knocking a ball on or a forward pass or whatever. You say, but this is what we love about Fijian rugby. They keep it loose. But they can do that, but they will not win a World Cup. And I've still got hopes for this team. But they will not win a World Cup, and they will not make the semis if they play this type of game. They really need to go back to just slow the game down a bit, make sure that they can, you know, get that second, third phase ball, clean out the ball, and not isolate as much, or they are going to struggle when they get up to the bigger games in the tournament. You cannot do this against South Africa. You cannot do this against the All Blacks. You cannot do this against France. You cannot do this against Ireland. If they get that far, they will not go any further. The thing is, we know if they win that last game versus Portugal, in the quarters they'll play England. And England, to me, they've improved a lot. So they will have to be much better than what they were in this game. Lineouts. That's another thing, guys. In this first half, with the Fijians, lineouts was poor. Overthrowing every single lineout at the start, and then suddenly throwing in skew. I mean, you don't win games like that. I think they conceded lineouts like 5 or something. We'll look at the statistics at the end, but it was shocking how many lineouts they were just losing. Also, what I saw is Georgia was using the up and unders a lot more, and the Fijians wasn't playing as much of a kicking game in the first half, and it was successful for them because Fiji wasn't very good under the up and unders. You know, just not taking those balls cleanly in the air, knocking on balls. And then also the likes of Kurivoli missing kicks suddenly to the post, which, you know, that's another thing that they're going to struggle with since they don't have months to kick to the poles. When these pressure games come on, they must be able to convert their points. That's another thing in the first half that they couldn't do. And before you know it, you know, Georgia was up 9-0, you know, very quickly, just because of conceding penalties. And Ninishvili and Makava, both those kickers are outstanding, man. They're kicking it over from all over the field. And that's why I say this Georgian team has got a lot of promise if they just work at a few things in their game. Georgia was very good also at the breakdowns, just as on the jackling and everything. If the Fijians just isolated a little bit, they were over those balls. And the Fijians was isolating quite a bit. I just felt the Fijians had a few chances closer to the line to score. And again, not just playing through phases, playing with their forwards and then sucking in the defense and then wanting to move it out wide. They just don't suck in any of the defense. They don't play enough of the forwards through phases. They just want to run it from first phase ball. And unfortunately, that's not going to work with a team like Georgia that had really good defense structures. The only way you're going to break a line like Georgia with a good defense structure is you need to play phases to suck in the defense and then you move it out wide. So something that the Fijians have to stop doing is thinking they can run the ball after the first phase ball. Play 4, 5 phases. They got big boys, suck in the defenders, and then you move it out wide. This team has got, this Fijian team with the size of these players, they've got all the talent in the world if they can just start playing the right type of rugby, you know. Their style of rugby can still be loose when it comes to a backline, running it, you know, the offloads. But if they want to really be competitive in this World Cup and going into the future of world rugby, when these big games come up, they need to play, you know, clever rugby. This is not very clever rugby from the Fijians to just keep running the ball from all over the field. I want to see this Fijian team do well. You've seen my videos. I am a great supporter of this specific team doing well. But they're not going to do it like this. Not when it comes to the tight games, unfortunately. The Fijians before, if you look at the game against Australia, what they did really well is they played the up and unders really well. They were very competitive under the up and unders. They were a lot more clinical under the up and unders. In this game, in the first half, they played very minimal up and unders. Just thought they were going to run Georgia. And that's the thing. Just don't play differently is what I would say to this Fijian team. Go look at what you did against Australia. They played a better territorial kicking game for the corners. The up and unders was much better contested. That's the type of team that'll do well. Play a few phases. Don't isolate. You know, just slow the game down a little bit. And then, you know, it was already 9-0. And then there's this break from Georgia. I mean, their backline's very dangerous. They're so good at the counter-attack. They get a break, and you think, oh, this is a try, you know. And it's a marginal forward pass, and it's not considered as a try. They're already celebrating. Now, a lot will say, oh, no, that wasn't a forward try. I actually looked at the camera angle. I played it in slow motion. Unfortunately, I cannot show that content of the World Cup. They don't allow us to show the content. But you'll see the 5-meter line, and the player that passed the ball on the 5-meter line was before the 5-meter line, and the player catching the ball catches it on the 5-meter line. It was marginally forward, but it was forward. And you know, that is the big thing. If the Fijians conceded that try, they could have lost this game, and that would have opened it up for Australia again. So a bit of luck going their way there, but that's what I would say. You know, this game, the Fijians was keeping the Georgians in this game. Then going into the second half, you could see, obviously, Louis had a good chat to them. In the second half, you could see they were doing a few things better. Their territorial kicking was better. Their lineouts improved a lot. definitely there was something said there, because I don't know what was going on in the lineouts in that first half. Their general kicking was better, but still super loose. Second half, the same thing, loose. They were playing so loose, not playing phases. And that's why the Georgians stayed in this game, because taking nothing away from the Georgians was very good in many ways, but the Fijians have all the tools to have beaten this Georgian team with at least 15 to 20 points, but they didn't make the right decisions on the field. I felt not too long into the second half, it was a tough call on Semi Radradra. It was really just his finger touching the ball. I don't think there was anything really that intentional. But that's the laws, guys. And unfortunately, that man had to get a yellow. He was off. And then now that I felt, wow, 14 versus 15, Georgia really have a shot here. And I felt, look, man, Fiji, come on. Don't let this slip. You have the perfect opportunity to make a quarter of a World Cup. Just a bit later in the game, Georgia does exactly what I think Fiji did well against Australia. They play phases, they suck in the defense, and eventually move that ball out wide. And you thought that would be a try, but amazing cross defense from Fiji, and they don't score the try. But then this moment of brilliance. I mean, this is the thing when Fijians score tries. They are so individually so outstanding. Nias Levu, I don't know how he scored that try in the corner. He runs into that corner and he kind of gets tackled and moves his whole body around and gets the ball down in the corner. And we've seen this from wings, all the really classy wings and centers in this World Cup, how they find themselves getting into these corners and getting the ball down without being tackled out is just, it's amazing. It looks superhuman. And this is how it looked to me with Nias Levu. It was such a good try. And what a player, man. This guy is so instrumental to this Fiji team. And that's, the Fijians had to, count on individual players to win this game, because as a team, they were lacking a lot. And I mean, at no point here do you feel Georgia's out of the game, because Georgia was still right into this game. The one try, I think, makes it a 1 point difference between, I think Fiji was leading 10-9 or something. And the game's close, man. I felt Fiji was kicking a little bit better second half, more of an aerial battle, just to kind of also get that territorial advantage, looking for the 50-22s. Also, more of a territorial kicking, not just the up and unders, because they weren't very good at the up and unders. So I thought it was clever for them to start looking to play more of a territorial game. But the Georgians was also really good. Both teams, challenging each other with the territorial game. And there, another opportunity comes Fiji's way. Georgia with a high tackle, like a seatbelt tackle. And you think, oh, it's Fiji's opportunity. They missed the kick again. And this is the thing. It's big games, guys. These kicks, you've seen it with South Africa, with the Springboks. You've got to take your points in these big games. And then another outstanding individual, I think, performance. He didn't score the try, but Bhatia breaks the line. It was very loose. Never stopped right to the game. But Bhatia gets an opportunity. He gets a loose ball. He breaks through. He breaks like 2 tackles and then gets that ball off to Habasi, and Habasi goes through for a try. A beautiful try in the end, but, very loose. But they score another great individual try. And, now you start feeling, okay, Fiji's going to close this down. They are going to, get the job done. And I mean, the Georgians still again on the counter attack, man. They a few times break, and the cross defense from the Fijians was good to stop them from a few great opportunities for them to score. But they are very dangerous on the counter attack, these Georgians, and they've got a lot of pace. And then comes this unfortunate event. We see it happen in these ever so often in these games. Tuisofa goes in too high, face collision first, gets a yellow, and this is bad news for Fiji, because the game ended not too long after that, and you know that yellow is going to be turned into a red, and the question is, how many weeks is he going to be out now? 3 weeks. It's a big blow for this Fijian team. Their starting team, they don't have necessarily the same quality coming from the bench, and someone like a Tuisofa is such a good player that it's unfortunate for them to get that card. And that could also hurt them in their depth going into the playoffs. I think there's something like a 5 points between the two teams in the end, and Georgia gets a last break. They not a break basically. From the kickoff, they just decided we're going to run it. And they keep running and moving the ball around, and here they break the line. And man, I mean, they got so close to the try line. and put a kick through and chasing the ball, and just in time the Fijians get there and they kick it out and they win by the skin of their teeth, really. And if you step back, if you look at the full game, there was so many, that marginal pass. If you just look at some of the penalties that the Georgians gave away, if they didn't, they could have won this game, guys. And if you look out of a Fijian perspective, me wanting the Fijians to do well, I have to say, if this Fijian team's not going to stop playing this loose type of rugby, and what I mean by loose type of rugby, guys, sometimes you just play it through the phases, play it patiently, hold on to the ball. The Georgians sometimes play it up to 10 phases before they start moving in the backs. They need to play some phases. Get more calculated kind of offloads. Don't just offload anything and just throw it into thin air and just throw it into empty spaces. Because there was just too much of that from the Fijians. We like the loose type game, but there's a balance between too loose and, you know, kind of a structured loose. You can play a structured loose. Territorially, Fiji had 56% versus 44%. That's not a big difference, you know. And that's because the Fijians in the first half didn't play a territorial game. They didn't try and get out of their own half, try and kick for the corners and then work from there. They were just trying to run it from all over. And then the same with possession. First half, I felt that the Georgians really starved them of ball in many ways. Even though it was very close in the stats, I do feel that the Georgians used their opportunities better to hold on to the ball. It's just some handling mistakes, I think, is their issue. But I mean, if you look at it, meters carried, 495 versus 480. I mean, the Georgians was right up there. They had a lot of breaks. Runs, 149 versus 105. But look at the gains that the Georgians had, the meters they made with their runs. I mean, passes, the Fijians, just too many passes. I mean, 188 passes in a game. It's not necessary. It's not necessary because a lot of those passes cause knock-ons and it squander opportunities that you could have had. Offload, similar, you know, Ruck's one, you know, that's the thing. Like, they had opportunities at the Rucks to kind of just play another Ruck, because at the Rucks they were winning it. They were winning their own Rucks for the most part. But when they isolate and they run away from their cleaners, who needs to clean the ball, their cleaners, then they concede, you know. Kicking also similar at the end, but I must say Fiji really, with their kicking, improved towards the second half. Kicks regathered, you see a big problem there for the Fijians. 5 regathered. They were really good under the up and unders and regathering the ball. The Georgians, the Fijians wasn't all that good. Set pieces, poor, man, in many ways. If you look at this in the scrums, you know, just a 69% success rate, which is not great. 7 out of 8 for Georgia, better at the scrums, you know. Then looking at the lineouts, and I said this, the Fijians was good at the scrums. When I felt is they held their own versus the Georgians, but they weren't like, what I mean by that is they weren't like 100% great at the scrums. They were lacking really at set pieces. I mean, the lineouts was horrendous, like really, really bad. 68% doesn't even show how bad it was in the game, you know. And then you look at the Georgians again, 7 out of 9. Georgians was unlucky to lose this game, honestly. The Fijians wasn't at their best. Line-out steals 2 versus 1. I don't know, because it might have, the steals obviously is a different story, but many balls was lost by the Fijians in the line-out with overthrows. The first half was really, really poor. And then discipline, guys. This is what's costing the Georgians, 13 versus 8. The Fijians was also not very good with their discipline. But it's that allowed them, the discipline was a problem, but the individuals is what made the difference for the Fijians to win the game with individual brilliance at times. But I mean, too many conceded by Georgia. And if they can get that right, this Georgian team can be dangerous, man. Tackles, you can see defense, 108 versus 197. Georgia was tackling, man. Their defense was really phenomenal for most of the game. I was super impressed. They kind of looked like a, you know, like a Springbok team, or I'm using Springboks because I'm South African Springbok supporter, but we could use anyone, you know, Ireland, France, All Blacks. They look solid on their defense, but the Fijians made the Georgians look good, because the Fijians was throwing it around so much that all that the Georgians had to do is hold their line and then just keep defending, because the Fijians was just moving the ball laterally over the field and then eventually throwing loose balls and knocking it on, instead of saying, let's just drive it up, play some phases, suck in that defense, that they actually have to do the work and make the tackles. And then when you've got bodies on the ground, you move it out and give it to a Semi Radradra or Nayaslevu, and then they can break the line. You know, the big boys can score the tries. But they approached it wrong, in my opinion, you know. And then tackles missed also. You know, you can see Fijians missing more tackles than the Georgians with 28 versus 17. Also poor. But again, it's this whole loose game that they were playing. You know, tackle success is worse than the Georgians, 71 versus 82. These stats, many show you that should have actually been a Georgian win, if you look at this. Turnovers won. Both teams were competitive there. Both had good jacklers. But the Georgians was, you know, matching up with the Fijians who were the jackling. And if the Fijians' problem was they were isolating too much and allowing those Georgians to get over those balls. They have all the players. They just need to slow down a bit so that they don't get those turnovers, so that they have their cleaners there to clean out. And if their cleaners are not there, there's a problem with Fijian rugby, because this is not sevens. You cannot just run and hope there's only one guy there to clean. And if he's not there, it's okay. It's not good enough. You need to have you need to not isolate, have your cleaners to clean out the ball. Your two guys, or one guy, at least two, run in your pods. You know, they need to not, isolate from their pods. Run in twos and threes and make sure that there's always someone there to clean. They're not running in their pods. They're isolating, and that's why you're getting all those turnovers. And the Georgians was really good at those turnovers. So lastly, let's look at this Pool C. So the Fijians still have a very good shot of going through into that quarters, but they are keeping Australia in there with an opportunity still, because the opportunity obviously is that the Fijians still have the pressure that if they, for some reason, a few things don't go their way, and Portugal also comes with a very competitive breakdown type game, just on the day, if there's an upset, you know, that gives the Australians a chance again, because they didn't, as far as I know, they didn't win with a bonus point in this game against Georgia, which means that if they had to lose and the Australians win versus Portugal tomorrow with a bonus point, when Fiji has to play Portugal in their last game, if they lose, they give Australia a chance to get back in, because the Australians will probably put a big score on Portugal tomorrow, which that gives them that outsider's chance. So Fiji has now allowed Australia with a serious outsider's chance, but there's still that little bit of a chance where if they won this game with bonus points and they played really well and pushed out that score aggregate, they would have known they're safe. So yeah, but guys, it's still a very, very good chance that Fiji will get through to the quarters. I mean, I don't see them losing against Portugal. So guys, what do we take from this? Well, they individual brilliance, they got it through across the line. You know, they're still leaving some opportunity, they're still leaving some doubts in everyone's minds that, you know, is this going to be good enough going into a quarters? But maybe they'll learn from their mistakes, and hopefully, you know, Roa Louis will look back at what did we do right against Australia and what have we been doing wrong against Georgia, because the Fijians was improving, and this was just right back to the loose type Fijian rugby, Pacific rugby, which will not win you World Cups. And I really hope that they can really turn it around and play an outstanding, you know, more structured, phased game against Portugal, going to that quarters with confidence, because England's going to go in with confidence. They've pretty much won all their games, and they've won it convincing. It's looking like a more informed England team. And I'm telling you, with not wanting to I really want this Fijian team to do well. But if they're going to play anything like they played here against Georgia, they will not beat England in that quarters. The English have got a lot of depth. They've got a lot of players on the bench, and they're finding form. And, you know, the likes of a George Ford dropping back for those kicks. Who's going to put that guy under pressure? If it's loose like this, the Fijians are going to struggle in that quarters. You know, the funny thing about the Fijians is the more they throw the ball around, the less they're going to score tries, in my opinion, because there's more chances of knock-ons and stuff like that. The more they can just run with the forwards, play it through some phases, get to 5-6 phases, suck in the defense with their big boys, and then move it out. Run in their pods, don't isolate, and then start moving it to the backs. They'll probably score more tries, and that's all they have to do against Portugal. Guys, if you enjoyed this video, hit the subscribe button. I'll appear on your home screen, and see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, like always. Appreciate every single one of you, comments you leave, but I appreciate every one of you. Maybe one day I'll do it full time and I'll be able to respond to all of you. Thanks so much. Bye.